In this episode, we consider the extent to which Justice Samuel Alito's flag flying controversy undermines the U.S. Supreme Court as an institution and whether that may be the point. And later on, we'll discuss the NCAA's historic settlement that will result in revenue sharing with college sports players, react to the claim from one scientist that he can prove that all of this is just a simulation, and consider whether humans are, in fact, addicted to addiction. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and riding shotgun with me today is a man who always gives you what you want, although he may not be the most polite about it. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to show the people why they call you a rude boy?
Of course, man.
All right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you hit subscribe or hit the like button on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, we're recording this on May 28th, 2024. And Tunde, I want to jump right in and ask you. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito has caused some controversy recently, and it was revealed that he was flying flags associated with Stop the Steal and with far right political movements and such, and dating back to 2021, when around the time of the insurrection, and also even last year. Now, one of the most important things with the Supreme Court, just as an institution, is to maintain the appearance of impartiality, kind of being above the fray. That's why they're not elected. So what are your thoughts on these controversies? Do you think that, this is something that is a big deal, or do you think this is being overblown, just another media story to get clicks?
I don't know. I'd say it's exciting. We got judges who are, I guess, sympathetic to insurrectionists. So where do we go from here?
Who are judging insurrectionist cases?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very interesting. It's a sad reality. That's why I say it's exciting times, because this is how, history goes sideways sometimes, where you have people in elite positions like this that really don't like their own country. I don't... Or
at least large majorities of it.
Yeah, well, I guess really what the country is about, right? Yeah. And that's my thing is for you to fly a flag upside down, obviously you did that on purpose. There's a certain meaning to it, all that. Obviously, we could get into the flag code of the United States. I mean, that's only to be done in distress, flying a flag upside down. So clearly, it's a disrespect to the America that he sees. I mean, I'm going to assume he doesn't like plurality. He doesn't like the way the country's gone, I guess, and he's upset. And what's interesting to me is that he threw his wife under the bus. It says
that's what I thought you were going to say when you said it was exciting. Is that this guy's throwing his wife under the bus? Who knows what's happening now? At the household. Like, yeah, you're going to take the fall for this.
Yeah. Makes me appreciate Clarence Thomas, though. His wife was found to be supporting an insurrection. He just stayed quiet. He didn't throw his wife under the bus. So he's a little more respectable on this one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my take, though, man. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, no, I think...
as an attorney yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that definitely affects the way I view this. I mean, because as I kind of led into in the intro, like the court is supposed... Like, one of the most important things, even when there's not impropriety or there's, the court is supposed to maintain the appearance of that. Because the legitimacy of the court relies on people buying into the court as being above the political fray. That's why judges are set off separately. Now, many state, local judges will be elected, but with federal judges, they're not even elected. These people are put in, they're appointed and then confirmed by the Senate, and then they're there for life or as long as they want to be. And that is to remain above the fray. And so him doing this, the thing is that you have to come to grips with is he's not stupid. He knows that by doing this, it will be known. It could be discovered that he did this. And so he's doing this. And obviously, you flying a flag is not you holding some secret belief. You flying a flag is intended to broadcast to everyone that you have this belief. And so what he's doing, basically, I look at this and wondering, is he trying to undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court? Because what you're saying, basically, is not untrue, in terms of having a problem with the way that what the country's about. Because the Constitution, is a certain thing, and if you're trying to overthrow the Constitution, you have to delegitimize the institutions that have been set up by the Constitution. Whether that's delegitimizing voting, which Stop the Steal was all about. Now he arguably is trying to delegitimize the Supreme Court by doing this, because if Supreme Court justices are all on the take, then the natural response to that will be, oh well, the other people are doing bad stuff too, and what you end up is this assured mutual destruction. And so to me, that was really what's happening here. This wasn't some mistake or error, and like, oh, I didn't know anybody would ever see this. Like I did this in my basement, of my home, and nobody ever goes down there. Like he did this out front of his house. So it's an intentional move to publicly delegitimize at least a part of the Supreme Court. And what you do once you delegitimize the institutions is you then just take power. You're delegitimizing the institutions that operate, from a all men are under the law standpoint, democratic voting and all that kind of stuff. And you say, no, we're just going to take this. And, that to me seems to be, and that, again, that's consistent with what we know what Stop the Steal was about. So it seems like he was trying to further those ends, and delegitimize, do his role to delegitimize where he could.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
And let me add this, just from the inside, delegitimize from the inside. Man.
Well, no, I think that, look, we got to look at it for what it is. I mean, in reality, right? Because two things have been shown to have happened. One was that he flew his flag, the United States flag, upside down. The second was that he had
and that was in the 2021 period. Yeah, 2021.
Yeah. And
the second one.
The other flag was the the pine tree flag, which, my understanding, it's a flag for people in solidarity with the Christian right that believe that this should be a nation that's run under Christian laws. So basically a theology and not the secular democracy that we've had since its founding. And which is interesting to me, because I think what a lot of Americans don't appreciate is that would put us in a trajectory of countries like Iran or Saudi Arabia, where you would have someone who's like a supreme leader, who's a religious figure that basically is on top of and can tell the legislature and everyone else what to do based on biblical law and not
their interpretation, by the way, of biblical law, or someone's given interpretation of biblical law.
And they seem to be more, I think, Pentecostal and Methodist, I think, that the type of denominations that they follow. And it's just, and that's the thing. And that's why I say, like, it's interesting having this conversation with you as an attorney, because my understanding as someone who's not an attorney is that, part of the 3 years in law school, and you seem pretty well versed on the history of the founding of this country and the legal framework of the founding documents in the Constitution. And so that's what makes it more offensive that a gentleman who's in the Supreme Court, has these views that he seems to not like his own country, the founding of, the nature that the way this country was founded to be pluralistic, and to the First Amendment saying there should be no religion legislated in the United States. Again, and we've said this on other discussions, because the founding fathers understood that once you pick one religion, maybe some of those people are happy, but everyone else won't be. And that one group of people is going to try and tell everyone else how to practice even their own religion. And so it's better maybe to allow people to practice how they want freely, any religion. And so, that's kind of the evidence of the effort to undermine, overthrow, the Constitution. You can call it a revolutionary in that sense. That Constitution specifically calls for, that, hey, this is a no establishment. There's no establishment clause. You cannot establish a religion as being, part of the law or whatever. And people's hands are tipped to this. I mean, and that's flying that, pine tree flag, is something that, Speaker of the House, he's flown that flag, everything. And they're a bit transparent that they think Christian rules or whatever, because, the Bible isn't a law book, like you have to then say, okay, here's what it says in this part of the Bible. I want to use this. There's other stuff I'm not going to use, but you have to start picking and choosing so the people who want to do like quote unquote religious law, it's still their interpretation or their selection of certain things that they want to enforce. And then the other things they'll ignore, but they tip their hand because there are people that are going around right now, in various state legislatures, and
they are very adamant that we can't have the anti-Sharia law. We can't have Sharia law in the United States. But, one, that's already taken care of by the Constitution. But two, they're not saying we don't want any religious law. They're just saying we don't want Sharia law, which seems to be setting the stage to say, okay, well, first we're going to say no Sharia law. Then we're going to go into and say, hey, we want to adopt these things from Christianity. And that is against the founding principles of the country. So you have to look at it. This isn't conservative to want to try to incorporate religion into the laws of the United States. That's revolutionary. That's something that's trying to change what we're doing, what we have been doing here for a long time. And that's not to say that there haven't been people trying to do this before, or that there haven't been people who succeeded at various, state, federal, municipality levels and really showing bias or favoritism to a certain religion or deference to what that sect of that religion says needs to happen. But ultimately, we have to look at this for what it is. And that, I think, is the biggest takeaway, is that he has publicly signaled a desire to divert from, at minimum, what's written in the Constitution. You have congressmen now calling for him to recuse himself from, the cases related to the insurrection or anything around that. And that's something that should be taken very seriously, because the recusal is a mechanism to try to restore legitimacy. So we'll see if he actually does that, because, again, what I see this as is his attempt, in the same way that Donald Trump attempted to cast legitimacy on the voting system, or to cast illegitimacy on the voting systems. This is Alito's attempt to put illegitimacy on the Supreme Court. So him recusing himself now would actually undermine his own effort, or apparent effort, I should say. So we're going to see how this plays out. We don't know how it's going to play out yet. But again, these seem to be shots across the bow at the U.S. Constitution. And so people who support the U.S. Constitution are going to have to speak up against this and stand against this. Otherwise, you may wake up, and I think you're correct. You may wake up in a country that's governed by religious law, and you say, okay, well, it's not going to be Iran or something, or Saudi Arabia, because we have a different religion. But religious law generally goes to the same places when it's tried to impose on a society-wide level. So you could end up in that. When you have the Dark Ages in Europe, those were religious law places as well. And they were very restrictive in the same way that we look at an Iran or Saudi Arabia right now. So that's the trajectory that they're signaling they want to take us on.
Apparently, there's people that left Europe to start their own country where they could practice religions freely. I wonder.
Yeah. Imagine
I wonder how that experiment's going 250 years later. Yeah, maybe there'll be people within that system that attack it. I don't know. But you say something interesting about Sharia law, because there's a fun fact for the audience that there's a country called Russia which actually does allow in certain provinces Sharia law. So there are interesting examples of countries that allow different religious laws to be used within the country based on where the population, how much of a given population there is. But I just want to say something.
Well,
I know we want to wrap
also
up.
That's they're running a way that doesn't have. There's no guarantee of freedom of religion or freedom of speech or freedom of anything. Like Russia doesn't brand themselves as the land of the free.
Yeah.
So that's not inconsistent. They can put any kind of law in because it's all governed by the whims of the autocrat.
Yeah. No, and just the thing you mentioned that I want to bring up, which you said that the Supreme Court justice is appointed for life. You know what I started thinking of? The way that people talk about government bureaucrats who aren't elected, and they refer to them as the deep state and all this kind of murky, mysterious conspiracy theory type of stuff. But then they don't look at a guy like this as also a quote unquote deep state actor. I mean, this is ridiculous that we have a Supreme Court justice that flew the United States flag upside down. Period. Just the fact that he did that is ridiculous. And then to understand that it's most likely because he's in solidarity with people that stormed the Capitol. I mean, that's what I'm saying is you're right. This is not, I'm offended for conservative people that these people keep masking themselves as conservative. They're radical and they're revolutionary. They don't like this system and they want to blow it up. And, it's pretty obvious to me that this is how someone like this feels.
The allusion to deep state is a good one. I do want to get out of here, but just to speak on that a little bit. A lot of times the complaints you hear about the deep state, ironically, are people who are upset that people within the government have allegiance to the U.S. Constitution. When you're talking about like Mattis and all those guys, General Mattis, years back, his allegiance was to the U.S. Constitution, not to who the president was at that time. And then the president said, "Oh, well, that's the deep state. They're restricting me from doing the things I want to do on my whims." And they were doing so on the principle of, well, the Constitution doesn't allow you to do that. With the converse here, is that this is a person who is actually, again, in a part of a quote unquote deep state, who is specifically trying to undermine the Constitution in favor of some ideology that is not, in the Constitution. So, where you can call out a deep state, so to speak, it's like, well, okay, well, what is these actors who are in the government? What's their allegiance to? Is their allegiance to the U.S. Constitution? Well, that's the kind of deep state we would want. Is a bunch of people in the government who they all take the oath of enlistment or the oath of office that declares allegiance to the Constitution. That they're supposed to have that allegiance. The more troubling one is what we're seeing from Alito, where it's like, okay, well, his allegiance seems to be more ideological and less to the U.S. Constitution. And in fact, he seems to want to undermine the U.S. Constitution from a position on the inside as a quote unquote deep state. So, but I do think we can wrap from there. We're going to have part 2 coming up here shortly. So we hope you join us for that as well. And thank you for joining us on this part.